My old dearest friend, Matt Clark, who in the film is the priest slash rabbi, and Emilio's son, Taylor, who at the time was 19, and he was working for me since he was a sophomore in high school. And he loved to travel with me. We went to all kinds of places, and he loved the adventure. And so I said, we're going on pilgrimage to Santiago. Oh, fine, he said. And then I realized we only had like 3 weeks left. And so we looked into doing it on horseback, because you can do it on horseback, but you have to take the mules and all your equipment, then you have to feed the horses and so forth, and change horses along the way, and it's a much different path, I thought, no, it's not going to work. Well, we'll look into bicycles, and we did, and it looked like it was uphill both ways, so we thought, no, bicycle. So we did the only thing we could possibly do, like, very tourist Americans. We rented a car, and we drove the Camino. And still, it was an extraordinary experience. And at the stop at a refugio in Burgos, Taylor met his future wife. He's lived in Burgos ever since. And that was the first miracle along the road. So I came back, I started telling Emilio all these stories, and I thought, you really got to write a scenario. This is something waiting for us to do, and he got into it. Then he went online and he started reading books, and he got carried away with it. And I had always intended to go back and really do the Camino, all the way from Concepcion to Santiago. And he began to write scenarios, and we began to discuss them and add and subtract. And finally, he hit on a father-son theme, and that's what we decided to do. And he dropped everything else he was doing and focused on this. The meaning of pilgrimage is that we make a physical journey outwardly. In other words, you have to go from this place to this other place, and along the way you have to endure, a long and arduous and sometimes very painful journey, exposed to the weather and the elements, and there's no private rooms, and a soft place very often. It's going to be rough, and you carry everything with you. And though you walk alone, you are part, and very integral part of a community. That is the first thing that begins to become very clear to you. You can't do any of this on your own, You can't prepare your meals. You can't fix a place for you to bed and bathe and so forth, and look after yourself. You need the others, and yet you still must walk alone, because the pilgrimage is an equal journey inside as well as out. And the closer we get to the destination of the pilgrimage, in this case Santiago, the closer we get to who we are, and we begin to understand that our whole lives are pilgrimages, and that we are a part of a community, and we do have a responsibility, and that there is a possibility of great joy and satisfaction in our lives, and that's the overall miracle of the whole thing. And yet, in our film, I think explores that pretty clearly, and yet we don't hit you over the head with it. It's kind of an adventure. It's very interesting, because this American, this very conservative guy is going to do it his way, and he can't be bothered with all these other flaky people, these needy people, these broken, problematic people. And every time he gets on his own, he gets in trouble, And he begins to realize that, I can't do this alone. I must do it alone, but I have to join a community. I have to depend on others, and others have got to know that I've got to let them know they can depend on me. In the story, the father gets word that the boy has been killed in an accident in the Pyrenees in a freak storm. And he comes overseas to collect the remains and take him home. And he's a broken man, but he first must identify the body. And he's kind of stunned at the reality when it presents himself. And the officer has to unzip the bag, and the body bag, and so that he can identify his son. It's a stunning moment. And my son, Emilio, chose to be in the bag. I didn't know he was going to be in there. off camera, and that's what I saw. So that's what I'm reacting to is, oh dear God, you know. And it is, as you say, it is every parent's worst fear that you will bury a child. And how do you cope with that, you know? And that's our whole story, isn't it? You know, it's really a father and son journey. And the father begins the journey saying and believing he's doing it for his son. He's going to complete the journey that the boy could not complete. And gradually he begins to understand, no, he's doing it for himself. And he becomes the son. He realizes he's lived a very isolated, conservative life and has not opened himself up, opened up his heart to the world. And he becomes a pilgrim by the end. Well, you know, he wrote the part for me. And it's the kind of part that, you know, it's not likely that if it were a Hollywood film, you know, that I would have had a chance of playing the part. You know, there's so many well-known players, big stars these days that would have cherished playing that part because you don't get these opportunities at my age, you know, to play a substantial role these days in movies. Either you're playing a small part in a big picture, or if you get an opportunity to play a big part in a small picture, I prefer that, you know, because, you know, I still love acting. It's what I've enjoyed all my adult life, and I hope to continue doing it as long as I'm capable. But, you know, they're few and far between these days, and he handed me this role. And it was a great gift, you know, and I cherished it and became, you know, part of the company at his direction. And it was one of the great experiences I've had, you know. He's such a dear man, you know. I mean, I talk about him in another context as a professional, you know, not a fellow actor, but as a director, you know, and a writer. And he's just so extraordinary. He's the only director I've ever worked with that says, action, please, and cut, please, thank you, you know, maybe try another one, please. You know, he's so polite. The actors adore him. And he gives you the opportunity to accept the responsibility for your character. Remember when we arrived at the cathedral, there was a lot of anxiety because up until 48 hours before we arrived in Santiago, we had no permission to film inside the cathedral. They'd never allowed a dramatic presentation there, only films of documentaries and news footage. They'd never allowed anyone to come in there and film. And they waived that in our behalf and allowed us to come in. And Emilio told each one of us, select whatever you would do. This is your pilgrimage. Own whatever it is. Take the responsibility for it. And we all did. We did the things that we felt these characters would do. And still, when I watch the film today, some of the most stunning action takes place there that came from the actors because they had the freedom to do it. I'm a wreck. I've seen it maybe 4 times. I saw it for the 4th time in Washington at Georgetown University. We had a special screening there before we came over here. And it's still deeply moving. And I find different parts of it to be moving. And that just, it's each screening I see is a confirmation of what we did. And, you know, it's so powerful when you can feel the audience subjecting themselves to it. It plays very well when an audience begins to project themselves on such a journey. They begin to say, this is possible, and they go with us. And afterwards, so many people get interested and say, how do you do it? How do you go about that? You know, where do you start? How do you get there to do this? Where do you sign up? You know? And it's inspired a lot of people to consider going on pilgrimage.